Do you think it's possible through artificially created hallucinogenics to program someone, even if maybe just from one really good trip, to program them perhaps to change in their whole outlook on life? I get the idea with what you're speaking of with natural substances, you're bringing out something that's already in you or allowing some consciousness that perhaps isn't tapped. I'm speaking about introducing perhaps some foreign consciousness into your mind through chemically altered substances.
Do you mean as in a control or in a psychoanalytic sense, like curing an addiction or an obsession?
No, I'm talking about like having been given acid at one point, and I mean, even many years later, still sometimes having like flashbacks on it and wondering what perhaps might have been in that drug or what it did to you.
Well, I think that the most complex phenomenon in our world is the human psyche. And one does occasionally meet people who are horrified by my position and say, I took LSD 25 years ago and it's taken me this long to get it back together, and even now I don't feel that together. To me, the psychedelic is responsible only in the sense that it gave an X-ray of the psyche to the ego. And people who have been severely traumatized or abused or molested as children, who have real problems, are going to discover the breadth and depth of this traumatic material, and it may inhibit their ability to set themselves free and become great psychedelic explorers. I don't advocate this for everyone. In fact, I counsel people, and I don't always tell people they should go ahead with their plans if they're contemplating a psychedelic experience. Sometimes I tell them they need to do more reading or have more therapy, and sometimes I tell them they shouldn't do it at all. It's a calling. Shamanism is a calling, and in traditional societies, shamans pick and choose very carefully who they will take on as apprentices. So it's by no means a given that everyone is going to find these things to their taste. On the other hand, those who do find it to their taste will inculcate it into their lives very readily, and it will become very important to them, their self-definition, and their psychic growth. To address possibly another aspect of your question, is it possible to program people with these drugs, or a combination of these drugs and hypnosis and that sort of thing? I have no doubt that it is. The little bit that we see, that we are able to get declassified from CIA experiments in the 60s, is hair-raising. I mean, they dreamed of people who would commit acts of violence or assassination and then completely forget that they had done it. Now, how far down the road with these kinds of programs they got, we don't know to this day. I am very careful about who and what I am around in a state of psychedelic awareness, because you do imprint these things, and that's why, you know, in the same way that the shaman chooses his apprentice very carefully, the apprentice should be very aware of choosing the teacher very carefully. You, sir.
Yeah, I've had some major experiences with LSD in terms of ego death and just a complete crushing of my psyche and my point of view, and then have come through into some brilliant light and really a very spiritual experience. And I'm only now starting to play with the mushrooms for more of that experience. I wonder if you could relate if the mushrooms have the potential to have that painful aspect of the crushing and the ego death kind of experience so far I haven't had that kind of experience with the mushrooms.
Well, a very nice thing about the mushroom is that it's extremely tolerant of beginners. Nevertheless, downstream from those early experiences, you're dealing with, call it the overmind, the superego. It will give you not what you want, but what you need. And it can be extremely painful. It can be extremely humbling. It can be terrifying. It seems to me, in the people I have known and in looking at my own trips that had that quality to them, it's always to the good. The ego is completely obsessed with control and wants everything to be ameliorated and presented in easily digestible increments and to proceed along an orderly program of unfoldment. And it isn't like that. It has its own weather, it has its own dynamics, and you're much more in the position of someone sailing alone in a small sailboat. You can check the weather very carefully, and this will give you an edge. Nevertheless, squalls can turn into great storms with astonishing rapidity, and yet then you're in a position to really learn. But the learning is not, the real intense learning is not necessarily painless. And I see people nodding their heads all over the room. It is not for the faint-hearted. It just simply is not for the faint-hearted. People talk about how there are no frontiers left, and we lead such coddled lives within this society and in our well-furnished apartments with our stacks of CDs and all this. Actually, it isn't true. You can turn your living room into the helm of Magellan's ship. It's simply that the great unexplored dimensions are internal and psychological, but no less dangerous for that. So it's a calling for the exploring spirit, someone who really wants that thrill. Yes?
Yes, if I understood you.
Bad trips. They're certainly easier to do in a movie than good trips. I didn't see Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, but everyone said it proves again. Yes, the blonde woman in the back, and then the strong catalysts to say what has never been said, to see what has never been seen, to draw, paint, sing, sculpt, dance, and act what has never before been done, to push the envelope of creativity and language. And what's really important is, I call it the felt presence of direct experience, which is a fancy term which just simply means we have to stop consuming our culture. Catalysts to say what has never been said, to see what has never been seen, to draw, paint, sing, sculpt. We all must try to understand what is happening. We need to try to understand what is happening. And in my humble opinion, ideology is only going to get in your way. Nobody understands what is happening. Not Buddhists, not Christians, not government scientists, not, no one understands what is happening.
I am very perplexed when you say that time is speeding up. As far as
It's December 21st, 2012, and through
most shamanic journeys end up being a solitary journey of your own, whether you're the octopus with...
Now, this question about fear, which is a real question. There are two ways of being in the world if you're an intelligent creature. One is where the present is this hairline division between the past